Hey guys, back with another video, a review on Gravity Rush Remastered for the PS4. And I said I was going to play something a little different from like the JRPGs I've been playing, and this is pretty different. And this is a game that, of course, originally came out in the Vita, I think in 2012, and it got good reviews at the time. It always looked to be like this really original game, and unfortunately, I just never got around to playing it, even though it's been extremely cheap ever since it came out. In fact, it was for free on PlayStation Plus for like a very long time. Unfortunately, by the time I was actually interested in playing it, it wasn't on PS Plus anymore. And I remember playing the demo for it on the Vita, and I actually kind of struggled to get into it a little bit. I don't know if it was just because of the way the demo was set up, but I don't know. I found it kind of like the controls to be kind of irksome. I don't know. I just couldn't get into that demo, but I knew I still wanted to give this game another shot. And eventually, it did get a remastered release on the PS4, which is good because the Vita is not an extremely popular system. A lot of people don't own a Vita, and for such an original game, it was always a shame that not a lot of people got to really play it. So I was glad to hear the news that it was going to be remastered for the PS4. And I wanted a physical copy of this game, but in Canada, it's so expensive and hard to find. You could only get it through certain retailers, and it was like $50 to $60 Canadian. But digitally on the PlayStation Network, you can get it for far cheaper. In fact, I got it for a little less than $20 on sale not too long ago, which I think is a perfect price point for this game, especially considering how cheap it's been on the PlayStation Vita. And I haven't played the Vita version, so I'm not too sure of the main differences, but I think this game plays extremely well on the PS4. In fact, a lot of the times it kind of surprised me that this wasn't originally a Vita game. In a lot of ways, it doesn't really feel like it. It feels like it was really designed like for the ground up for the PS4. But I really enjoyed this game. I liked it a lot. I think this game is different. It's very unique, which I can't say for a lot of games these days. It's got this core gravity mechanic that is really neat, and it really makes traversal a lot of fun. Now, the game's not perfect. There's definitely some things that really bugged me about it, and it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with the sequel, which is one of the big reasons I wanted to finally play this. Gravity Rush 2 is coming out in December of this year, which is pretty crazy. I was not expecting that game so soon. From what I've seen, like that game looks amazing, like visually, like it's got a really striking art direction to it, which is the case with this game as well. But I think there is room for improvement with this game. I think the sequel could really add some interesting things to it, and it could be like this really like timeless game. Now, I guess we'll start with the story with this game, which is not one of the stronger elements to the game. It did surprise me in a few ways, and I think the main character is pretty likable. Her name's Kat, and in the beginning, she kind of has lost her memory, which, yeah, that kind of plot device, which we've seen so many times. And you're in this city. I forget what the name of it is called, like Hexville, I think. And basically, it's under the threat of this enemy known as the Nevi. They're like these kind of weird monsters. I'll talk about this more with the visuals, but they're like these red blob type monsters. There's all these different forms of these monsters, and they're kind of like infecting the city. And the main plot has you kind of trying to drive them off and trying to save the city. There's a few different twists and turns. The story is presented with these comic book strips that you're seeing now, and this is one of the elements of the game that reminded me of the Vita. When I was playing this game and I saw these sequences, I was like, okay, now this feels like a Vita game, and it kind of feels cheap. The drawings are pretty good. I think the art is still pretty good, but at the same time, it's kind of like instead of cutscenes, you have like these kind of sequences, so it's kind of, I don't know, it feels a little lazy, but at the same time, I think it really adds to the game. Like, I think it really fits the game's style, with like what they were going for. It kind of reminds me of like an anime at times, especially with like the way like the city, like the cities look, and the way like the art direction is in general, like the cel shaded art that the game's got, but. The main story, like it takes some really weird turns later in the game. I don't really want to spoil it, but there's like this whole sequence later in the game that is kind of it's bizarre. It completely comes out of nowhere for me, and I actually thought it was really interesting. I thought there was a few twists with the story there, and it gets really fucking weird in a way that a lot of Japanese games do. And this is one of those games that you can totally tell is Japanese when you play through it. But yeah, the story, I can't say it's terribly interesting. A lot of it is kind of dull. The writing isn't amazing, but the main character is likable. She's pretty like sassy and like upbeat, and you know, it's the game just has like this really lighthearted tone to it throughout most of the game that I kind of liked. Especially in combination with the music. But that weird part of the game that I'm talking about later has some dark stuff to it that I thought was kind of interesting. I wish I could talk about it more, but I really can't. But I am kind of curious to see where the story goes with the sequel, but it's not one of those things that I'm going to be looking forward to. And yeah, not like a highlight for the game. I think the gameplay is where this kind of game kind of shines, which we'll talk about that now. Now, it's in terms of genre, this game is kind of hard to classify. It's got elements of an open world game, but it's nowhere near as bloated as a lot of open world games. The city itself is still fairly small. It's divided into 4 different sections, and you kind of unlock each section as you play throughout the game. And besides being in the city, you also go to like these rift segments where you have like these really weird... They're like these weird looking areas that are very like dreamlike that I kind of really appreciated. But yeah, kind of like an open world format where you've got your main story missions that you're kind of tackling, but there's also characters you can talk to in the city. There's a few different challenges that you can do, like these challenge missions where you have to get like a bronze, silver, or gold medal. And other than that, like there's a few side missions that the DLC adds, which for this remastered version, it's got all the DLC of the PS Vita game, but obviously for free here. So you're kind of going throughout the city using your gravity mechanic, and this is the main mechanic of the game, where you have this cat with you named Dusty, and the cat is what gives you these gravity abilities. Where if you press the R1 button, you'll kind of manipulate gravity, and you'll get thrown up into the air, and you can kind of change your direction by moving the camera around, and you have like kind of like an aimer, like an aiming reticle. And if you press R1, you'll kind of like you'll kind of use gravity to kind of fly through the air, and if you press R1 again, you'll stop. So you can kind of get a better view of your surroundings and where you want to go. And of course, with the gravity mechanic, you can kind of really fully explore this city. You can kind of like go from underneath the city and like walk upside down along different parts of the city. And the sense of speed is exhilarating in this game. And there's a bunch of different moves that you can upgrade. This game's got light RPG elements, where you'll be collecting all these gems throughout the city. You'll see this here in the gameplay that there's a few gems you'll collect, and you're kind of upgrading your abilities. There's a bunch of different abilities. You can do like a gravity slide ability, which is kind of like you're kind of like sliding on the ground, and you get like an upgraded boost of speed, and you'll do a lot of races using this ability. Basically, you're just basically manipulating gravity to kind of traverse the environment, and that's where a lot of the fun of this game comes from. And collecting the gems is pretty addictive as well, and it's really satisfying to kind of upgrade your abilities. There's a great sense of character progression. By the end of the game, you feel really powerful. You get faster, your moves get stronger. And it's really fun, and it's a mechanic that I really haven't seen too much in games. In fact, I can't really think of any game, at least that does it in the way this game does it. The collecting gems kind of reminds me of Crackdown a little bit, where you're kind of collecting these orbs to kind of enhance your abilities, and it was just really fun kind of exploring the city. And a lot of the times playing this game, I kind of got distracted by that. Like, I was kind of forgetting about the main mission because I was just so having so much fun collecting these orbs and flying throughout the city. Now there's kind of like these shortcuts that you can kind of unlock throughout the city, so you can kind of warp from point to point, but it doesn't really take long to kind of traverse the city, which I like. And yeah, other than the challenge missions, which are actually really fun and they make full use of your abilities, and quite a few of them are actually quite challenging. The game itself is not terribly challenging. It's actually fairly easy most of the time, but if you want to get a gold medal on some of these challenges, it's actually fairly difficult. Now, there is actually also combat in this game. I think this is probably the weakest part of the game. There's not a whole lot of moves for you to use in combat. You get a few like super abilities later, but your main method of attacking enemies is to basically look for weak points on the enemies and press, I forget what it was square. I think you press square, and then you'll kind of do like this super, like this flying dash into the enemy to kind of attack the weak point. So you're basically kind of like using gravity to go all around the enemies and trying to like boost into their weak points. And that's generally what combat is like most of the time. There are times where you'll have to destroy like a part of an enemy, like a rock formation on them, to kind of expose their weak points. But the combat doesn't have too much variety to it. There's not a whole lot of enemy designs. And most of the time, all the enemies do will, like, some of them might try to rush into you and hit you. And then there's others that shoot like these red orbs that kind of try to hit you. But other than that, they don't have a lot of attacks. And by the end of the game, the combat definitely does get a little old. I do wish there was more like enemy and combat variety, but it's okay. It's not bad. I didn't hate it by any means. And some of the boss battles were fairly interesting. Some of them had a few different patterns that you had to take note of. But yeah, the combat is definitely not the strongest part of the game. The most fun I had was definitely kind of traversing the city and just, you know, the simple act of manipulating gravity to get to where you need to go. And then the challenge missions are surprisingly fun as well. Now, the DLC, I want to talk about the DLC because the DLC in this game is fucking terrible. Like, I was shocked how bad it was. If I paid for this on the Vita, I would have been pissed. Like, they have you do all this pointless busy work, like moving furniture with your stasis ability, and then you have like a tailing mission where you got to tail someone, and if they see you, you get caught, and you have to do it all over again. These really annoying segments where waves upon waves of enemies keep attacking you. There was one sequence where you would kill a bunch of enemies before you had like kind of a race against time with another character, and it had to defeat the most amount of enemies in a certain amount of time. And the AI was ridiculously good at this compared to you. It was very frustrating. There's also like a stealth element, a stealth segment in one of these DLCs. There's also a little bit of stealth in the main story, but not too much of it, and it's not really that annoying. But in the DLC, it's really frustrating. Like, the DLC was almost like, it almost felt like it was designed by a different team, and that they made it to just annoy you. Now, luckily, it's skippable. You don't need to do this DLC. It's fairly short overall. It does add a little bit of like, it kind of does tie into the story a little bit, but not a whole lot. You're not going to miss much by not doing the DLC. And I recommend, if you see it, like see the blue side missions that pop up on your map, don't bother. It's really frustrating and just not fun. Now, there were some elements of the game that were kind of like, I don't know, some of it felt like filler, like a lot of the main story. There are a few objectives they have you doing that are kind of annoying. But overall, it's a really enjoyable game, and it doesn't outstay its welcome either. This game is I think it took me about 15 hours. It would be a lot shorter if you just kind of rushed through the main story. But I liked doing all the challenge missions and collecting all the gems, so I got a lot of playtime out of it. Enough that I was satisfied with it, but at the same time, towards the end, it was getting a little tiring. Like, it's as fun as the game is, I don't think it's fun enough to sustain like a 30-hour game or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, other things to mention, you have like those super abilities I mentioned earlier, and the top left you'll see your blue gauge. You do have limited use of your gravity powers, so that's another element that you've kind of got to watch out for. But if you upgrade your usage gauge, you'll be able to basically fly through the air like for a long ass time. But yeah, you can kind of charge up super powerful abilities. It's like that pink orb you see in the top left there in the middle. So that's like kind of another element. Those abilities are kind of cool to use. I don't actually want to spoil them too much, but they can be helpful for combat. But I'm trying to think what else. I mean, other than gameplay, there's not too much else to it. I gotta say, I am curious how they're going to build on this for the sequel. I haven't looked into it all that much. I kind of want to be surprised by that. unless the game comes out and it apparently is bad. But I don't know. I expect it to be pretty good. But yeah, moving on to the visuals, I love the way this game looks, and I'm kind of shocked that it was originally a Vita game. Like, there's not like a whole lot of NPCs wandering around the town, and you know the textures aren't like amazing or anything. The level of detail is not like it's not crazy compared to like an actual PS4 game, but just the look of this game is so striking. It's got this amazing cel-shaded look to this game, and the art direction is amazing. I love the design of the cities. I don't know the exact like what it's inspired by, but it's got like this almost steampunk-ish look to it that the city has that I think is really striking. There are a lot of like browns and reds. The game overall is very like purple, brown, and red like looking, but I think it really adds to like the style of the game. Like, this is a perfect example of a game where like the art direction completely trumps like the technical aspects of it. Like, yes, technically this game isn't amazing, but the directions they've went with the visuals are striking. For instance, the draw distance in this game is not very good, but they kind of get around that by making everything like pen and ink. Like, if you see a part of the city in the background that's like really far away from you, it's all going to be in pen and ink mode. And as you get closer, it becomes more detailed. And I think it's like this really awesome stylistic choice to the visuals that really it's really quite striking looking. And it's a way to kind of make it so that the draw distance is really, it doesn't seem as bad as it really is. So yeah, I love the look to this game. I think environment variety is maybe a little lacking, and like I said before, like the enemy designs in this game I think are a little dull. They're all just basically different versions of like these red blobs, which is, I don't know, that's not particularly interesting. I hope the enemies are a little more interesting in Gravity Rush 2, and from what we've seen there is more environment variety in that game, a lot more different types of colors. But yeah, the visuals here I still think are top notch, and more surprising the fact that this is, you know, a remastered version of a Vita game. I gotta say, it would be interesting to go back to the Vita version and see how that looks in comparison to this, because I'm sure they, you know, kind of upped the, you know, obviously the resolution is better, and I think they've probably redone some of the textures and character models and things like that. But yeah, I really love the look of this game. Audio wise, it's amazing too. It's got like fantastic fucking music. It's a little hard to describe. Like, it's the kind of music that just really fits the game. It's heavily based on melody. And again, it's one of those things where like maybe this is, I don't know, my opinion here is that like Japanese games almost always have better music than Western games. Like, and this is just like a perfect example. The music is just, it's really well done, and again, it really fits like the game's look and style. A lot of the songs I ended up like humming in my head. Like, I really enjoyed the music in this game. Voice acting, there's not much of it. Like I said before, it's like these comic book strip things that you've got. Some audio comes out of like the PS4 controller, but yeah, there is some voice acting, but it's in like, I don't think Japanese. I think it's like a made up language for this game, but there's not too much of it. But the sound effects are all really good. I really like the sound effects, and most importantly, the music is just fantastic, really. So yeah, I mean, that about covers it. I guess another negative, sometimes it can be a little disorienting, this game. Like, it can be a little confusing, and it does take a while to kind of fully grasp like the gravity mechanics. And when enemies shoot projectiles at you, it can be a little annoying to dodge them, because like especially in the beginning of the game when you're kind of moving through the air kind of slowly. You can kind of go faster if you hold X and kind of flow through the air that way. But yeah, the controls definitely take a little getting used to. And sometimes the camera, it doesn't cooperate a whole lot. Like, you can fully control it, but a lot of times it does get stuck in like the environments. And there was a glitch that I ran into one time where I just kind of fell through one of the buildings, and I was kind of just stuck inside the building, and I had to reload. Luckily, the game auto saves constantly. There's a save point that you can always use, so it's generous in that way. The checkpointing is very generous too, which I appreciated. There are some segments of this game that go on forever, and I was starting to get annoyed at this one segment later in the game, and I died. And then when I came back, my checkpoint wasn't that far behind, so I was like, oh, good, this game's actually being nice. So I like it in that aspect as well. One of the interesting with this game, one of the interesting things with this game, I'm gonna wrap up the review now. When I looked to see who developed this game, because I actually wasn't sure who developed this game, and Project Siren developed this game, and these guys are known for the Siren games. Siren on the PS2 and Siren Blood Curse, I think it was, on the PS3, which are very atmospheric horror games. And I think the director of this game, Gravity Rush, also the director on Siren, was the original director for the original Silent Hill. So I think that's actually insane, how, the difference in gameplay here, or a bit basically like the difference in the games themselves. Like, Siren is such a different game from this, so I really think that's really, I think that's really cool how this director for their next game did something totally different in tone and gameplay. So it makes me want to go play Siren, because I've heard that game is actually a really top-notch horror game. Although there's some stealth elements to that game that kind of put me off, but at the same time, from what I understand, like, the atmosphere is really good in that game. But yeah, this developer, Project Siren, definitely a developer to keep my eye on. It'll be interesting to see what they do after Gravity Rush 2. I imagine they'll do something completely different from both this and Siren. So yeah, this game, it's not a perfect game, but it's original, it's unique, it's full of personality, it's vibrant, it's colorful. It's the kind of game I wish we got more of. And it's not even what I would consider like a AAA game. This is like a AA game. Like, this is the kind of game that would come out in like the PS2 era. And when we hit the PS3 era, we just didn't see too many of these games. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, I really enjoyed my time with this one. I would highly recommend this game, whether it be on the Vita or the PS4. Personally, I enjoyed this PS4 version so much, and it looks so good on the PS4 that, yeah, I would probably recommend the PS4 version over the Vita at this point. And from what I've seen, you don't have to pay too much for this game either. It's not going to be super expensive. So yeah, and it's definitely a game to play before this sequel comes out. And I'm glad, this is on PS4. It's going to reach a bigger audience now. Yeah, really good stuff. Highly recommended. And yeah, that's it, guys. Have you played Gravity Rush? What did you think of it? And I'll see you next time.